The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My father stood across from me, his face dark with anger, holding my college acceptance letter like it was garbage. I was 18 years old, standing in the same kitchen where I'd grown up, watching my whole future get torn to pieces. My hands were shaking. My mother sat at the table, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup like it was the most important thing in the world. My brother Liam lounged in the corner, scrolling through his phone, a small smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I could tell he was enjoying this. My father's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You think I'm paying for this nonsense?" he shouted. "College? For a girl?" I opened my mouth to speak, but he kept going, his words hitting harder than any physical blow ever could. I had worked so hard for this moment. "You don't need college, Maya," my father continued, his voice getting louder. "You'll just get married anyway. Why would I waste money on that?" I felt something break inside me. All those sleepless nights studying, all those hours at the library, all those times I stayed late at school to work on extra projects. It all suddenly felt worthless. I had earned a full scholarship. I had done everything right. I was the first person in our family to get accepted into a good university, and he was throwing it away because I was a girl. "But Dad, I earned a scholarship," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't ask you to pay for anything." He looked at me with such disappointment in his eyes. Without saying another word, he ripped the letter in half. Then he ripped it again. And again. The pieces fell to the floor like snow, and I stood there watching my dreams scatter. My mother still didn't look up. Liam smiled. That was the moment I knew my life was about to change in ways I couldn't even imagine. I walked out of that kitchen and never went back. Not really. That same night, I packed a single duffel bag with everything I owned that mattered. A few clothes, my phone, and some old photos. I was 18 years old and homeless. My father had already paid my brother Liam's full college tuition without hesitation. Liam was going to study business, something he'd decided on a whim just months before. No questions asked. No doubt. Just money handed over like it was nothing. But me? I was worthless in his eyes. I called a friend from school and asked if I could sleep on her couch for a few nights. She said yes without hesitation, which made me cry even harder. I walked down the street with my duffel bag, and I didn't look back at my childhood home. I remember the streetlight flickering above me, and I made myself a promise right there. I would never depend on my family again. I would build my life myself, and I would never need them. The first few months were harder than anything I could have imagined. I got a job at a diner as a waitress, working the night shift for minimum wage plus tips. The tips were usually small, but I saved every single penny. During the day, I would go to the library and study, trying to figure out how to make my college dream happen on my own. I was sleeping on my friend's couch, which was uncomfortable and embarrassing, but it was better than sleeping in my car. Well, for a while anyway. I would hear my coworkers talking about how their parents had paid for their college, how their moms had helped them move into the dorm, how their fathers were proud of them. Each time I heard these conversations, I felt something sharp twist inside my chest. I wasn't angry yet. I was too busy being tired. Tired of working. Tired of studying. Tired of being broke. Tired of being invisible. I would go home to the couch and lie there in the dark, listening to my friend's family move around the apartment, and I would promise myself that this would not be forever. After 4 months of saving, I couldn't save my friend's couch anymore. Her family needed the space. I was terrified. I had about $2,000 saved, which wasn't enough for an apartment deposit and rent. So I bought an old Honda Civic from a used car lot for $800. It wasn't pretty, and it made a weird noise when I turned left, but it was mine. I lived in that car for the next year. I would park it in different places so no one would notice me sleeping there. I'd wake up before dawn and drive to a gym where I'd paid for a membership just so I could shower. Then I'd go to the library before my shift at the diner. I studied by flashlight through the night, sitting in the front seat of my beat-up Honda, textbooks balanced on the steering wheel. The cold was terrible during winter. I used all the blankets I owned and still shook through the night. But I kept going. Every single day I kept going. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore. I was trying to prove something to my family, to myself, to anyone who cared to notice. I was trying to prove that my life mattered. One day, about 8 months after I'd left home, I called my father. I don't know why. Maybe I still hoped that he'd changed his mind. Maybe I wanted to hear that he missed me. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. When he realized it was me, his voice was cold. "What do you want?" he asked. I felt my heart shrink. I told him I was in college now, attending classes while working. I told him about my scholarship. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then he laughed. He actually laughed at me. "Your brother is in pre-med," he said. "That's where our future is. Your brother is going to be a doctor. That's what matters." I heard the words, our future. Not his future. Our future. As if my future didn't belong to us anymore. As if I'd already stopped existing in his mind. I whispered, "Our future? Not mine." He didn't answer. He just hung up. I sat in my car in the library parking lot and cried until my face was so swollen I couldn't see straight. After that call, something in me changed. The pain became fuel. I enrolled in community college while still working at the diner, squeezing in classes between shifts. My grades were perfect. I couldn't afford to fail. I couldn't afford anything except success. One of my professors noticed my dedication. She pulled me aside one day after class and said something I'll never forget. "Your resilience is marketable, Maya. Remember that." I didn't understand what she meant at first, but I held on to those words like they were gold. I graduated from community college with a 4.0 average. I transferred to a university as a junior. I was still living in my car, still working 2 jobs, but I was moving forward. I earned a scholarship that covered my tuition. I cleaned the library before dawn, which gave me access to the building and quiet study time. I worked as a tutor in the afternoons. Everything was exhausting, but I was building something. I was building myself. One day during my junior year at the university, I came across a social media post from my father. He was posting about my brother Liam. "So proud of my son," the caption read, with a picture of Liam at some party, smiling at the camera. There were no pictures of me. There were no posts about my accomplishments. My father had over 200 friends on social media, and none of them knew I existed. That hurt more than I expected it to. I went to visit my family once during my sophomore year of university. I drove up to the house in my beat-up Honda Civic, terrified and hopeful at the same time. My mother opened the door and hugged me, but her hug felt stiff, like she was hugging a stranger. My father barely looked at me. Liam bragged about his business idea, involving cryptocurrency and his plans to make millions. My father listened to every word, nodding enthusiastically, offering him money to invest. I sat there and said nothing. That night, I heard my father tell a friend on the phone, "She'll never outshine her brother." Those words echoed in my head for months. I graduated from university with honors. Nobody from my family came to my graduation. I walked across that stage alone, thinking about my father ripping up my acceptance letter. I was angry now, burning, furious anger that kept me awake at night. But I had learned to channel that anger into something productive. Right after graduation, I landed an internship at a major financial consulting firm in the city. The job was competitive, and the starting pay was barely enough to afford a tiny apartment, but it was legitimate corporate work. I slept on my coworker's couch for the first month until I could afford my own place. My boss noticed my work ethic immediately. She called me into her office one day and said, "You remind me of someone who's been underestimated their whole life. That makes you dangerous in the best way." I started building a reputation at the firm. I was the person who stayed late, who took on extra projects, who learned everything there was to know about financial analysis and investment strategy. I was the person nobody expected anything from, which meant I could surprise them. After 3 years at the firm, I decided to start my own consulting business. It was terrifying. I had saved enough money to live for 6 months without income, and that was my safety net. Torres Advisory Group started in a small office that I could barely afford. My first clients were friends of friends, people willing to take a chance on a young woman trying to build something. I worked 80-hour weeks. I studied economics and finance in my spare time. I took courses in business management and accounting. I was hungry in a way that scared me sometimes. I didn't take a single day off for 2 years. Every penny that came in got reinvested into the business. I didn't tell my family about any of this. I let them think I was still working as an employee somewhere, making decent money but nothing extraordinary. It was easier that way. It was safer that way. They couldn't take this from me if they didn't know about it. By year 5, Torres Advisory Group was successful. I had moved into a bigger office. I had hired 3 employees. My client list included major corporations and wealthy individuals. I was making real money now. Real significant money. I had paid off my car loan years ago. I had bought a small apartment. I had started investing in real estate. I had everything I dreamed of as a teenager sleeping in that cold Honda Civic. And my family still had no idea. I went to a family dinner one Thanksgiving and I made a mistake. I was feeling confident, successful, and proud of myself. When my father started bragging about Liam again, something about another business idea that was going to make him rich, I casually mentioned that I just closed my biggest deal yet. My client was a major real estate developer, and I'd helped them restructure their entire financial portfolio. My father looked at me with absolute contempt. Playing with other people's money isn't real work, he said dismissively. The whole table went silent. My mother stared at her plate. I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. Then I'll make real money, I said quietly. Real money that belongs to me. A month after that Thanksgiving, I discovered something that made my blood boil. I was contacted by a loan officer at a bank asking about a co-signed loan application. My name was on the paperwork. My signature was on the paperwork. But I had never signed anything. My father had forged my signature to take out a $50,000 loan for Liam's latest business venture. I was terrified and furious at the same time. I called a lawyer immediately. What he told me was that my father had committed fraud. I could press charges. I could go to the police. But I didn't. Instead, I confronted my father directly. I went to his house and we stood in his office, and I told him exactly what I knew. He didn't deny it. He shouted at me. "Family helps family," he yelled. "Your brother needed help, and you're successful. What's wrong with that?" I looked at him and said, "Family helps family only when it's your son. When it's your daughter, you tear up her acceptance letter and tell her she's worthless." I didn't press charges. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I took all the anger and pain and betrayal, and I turned it into a purpose. I started a YouTube channel called Torres Financial. On that channel, I taught women how to build credit, how to protect their assets, how to make smart investments, and how to never be financially trapped by anyone. I taught them about recognizing financial abuse. I taught them about independence. The channel exploded. Women started subscribing by the thousands. My first video got 5,000 views. My 10th video got 50,000. Sponsors wanted to work with me. I turned down offers that didn't align with my values, but I accepted sponsorships from legitimate financial education companies. Within a year, the YouTube channel was generating as much income as my consulting business. I was becoming known as an expert in women's financial independence. And I still never mentioned my family. Success felt different than I expected. I thought it would feel like winning. I thought it would feel like justice. But mostly it just felt like peace. I used the money I made from the consulting business and the YouTube channel to build a life that was completely mine. I bought an apartment. A real apartment that I owned, not rented. Every single item inside it I had purchased with money I earned. I had a bedroom with a comfortable bed. I had a kitchen with nice appliances. I had a living room with books on every wall. I had a bathroom where I could take hot showers whenever I wanted. Things that most people took for granted felt like luxuries to me. Every morning I would wake up in that apartment and remember sleeping in my car, and I would feel grateful. The YouTube channel brought me something unexpected. Stories. Women started sending me messages. They told me how my videos had helped them escape abusive relationships. How my advice had helped them save money and leave situations where they felt trapped. One woman told me that my channel had saved her life. She had been in a situation where her husband controlled all the money, and she had no way to support herself or her children. After watching my videos, she had started secretly saving money. She had a plan now. She had hope. Every single message like that made me feel like my pain had meant something. Then came the phone call that I'd been dreading and expecting at the same time. It was my mother. Her voice was shaky on the phone. "Maya, it's about Liam," she said. "His business, it's failing. He owes a lot of money. More than $500,000. I felt nothing. I had stopped feeling things about my brother years ago. My mother continued. Your father is trying to help him, but we don't have that kind of money. We're going to lose the house, Maya. The bank is coming for it. I listened silently as my mother begged me, without actually begging me, to help. She didn't say the words directly, but I understood. They needed money. They needed help. They needed me. The same daughter they had told was worthless. The same daughter they had refused to invest in. The same daughter they had kicked out of the house. And now they needed me to save them. My father called me a few days later. I almost didn't answer. His voice was hard, trying to sound strong but failing. Maya, I need your help with something, he said. You work with money. You're good at it. I need you to help me fix this situation with Liam. I felt my chest tighten. I could have helped him. I could have made some calls and solved the problem easily. But I didn't. I'm busy with clients who believe in me, I said quietly. Then I hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering if I'd made the right choice. But I knew I had. Some things couldn't be fixed by throwing money at them. Some things could only be fixed by people learning the consequences of their own choices. My assistant, a woman named Marcus, came into my office one day with some papers. She was excited about something. Maya, you should post about this, she said. Tell your followers about your family. Tell them what they did to you. Your followers would eat this up. It would be huge for your channel. I looked at her and said no. Marcus seemed confused. Why not? You've overcome so much. People need to hear about where you came from. Because, I said slowly, silence is stronger than bragging. Silence is stronger than revenge. If I post about my family's pain, I become the person who's gloating. If I stay silent and just keep succeeding, I become someone who's too busy living well to dwell on the past. Marcus nodded, but I could tell she didn't really understand. I didn't expect her to. The most powerful thing about success isn't telling people about it. Simply having it. I got a notification from a local real estate website. The house I'd grown up in, the house where my father had ripped up my college acceptance letter, was going into foreclosure. The notice was public. Anyone could see it. The bank would be auctioning it off to the highest bidder in 3 months. I read the notice twice and I felt my hands start to shake. I could buy that house. I had more than enough money. I could walk into that courthouse auction and bid on my childhood home and own it completely. The irony was so perfect it almost seemed like a story. I called my lawyer. I want to bid on a property, I said. I gave him the address. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Is this? He started. Yes, I said. It is. The courthouse was cold and sterile. I sat in the back row, watching as properties were auctioned off to different buyers. My father was there. He didn't see me at first. He looked smaller than I remembered. His hair was grayer. He looked like a man who'd been beaten down by life. When my childhood home came up, the auctioneer started with an opening bid. My father raised his hand, trying to bid on his own house. I stayed silent, watching. Another bidder jumped in. Then another. The price kept climbing. My father's bids became more desperate. I waited until the price was high enough, and then I raised my hand. The auctioneer pointed at me. New bid, he announced. I kept bidding. Higher and higher. My father looked around, trying to see who was bidding against him. When he saw me, his face went white. The gavel came down. Property sold to Torres Holdings for $740,000, the auctioneer announced. Torres Holdings was my company. He just realized his daughter had bought his house. I met with the bank manager the next day in a professional office with gray walls and fluorescent lights. We went through all the paperwork. My father owed money not just on the house, but on various debts that had accumulated over years. Liam's failed loans, credit card debt, medical bills from when my father had a health scare. Altogether, the total was almost $200,000 in outstanding debt beyond the house. I looked at the bank manager and I said, "Pay it all off. Transfer it to my account. I'll cover everything." The bank manager looked shocked. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I was sure. I was absolutely sure. I signed the papers. The debts disappeared. My father's slate was wiped clean. But nobody else knew. I kept it quiet. I didn't tell my father right away. I didn't make a big announcement. I just handled it quietly and professionally the way I handled everything. I drove to my childhood home one gray afternoon. It was empty now. My parents had already moved out to a smaller rental house. The windows were bare. The yard was overgrown. I stood in the kitchen where my father had ripped up my college acceptance letter, and I could still see the ghost of that moment. I could still feel the weight of his disappointment, his anger, his absolute certainty that I was worth nothing. I went upstairs to the room that had been mine. It was empty except for a small mark on the wall where I'd kept a height chart. I placed my hand over that mark, remembering the girl I'd been. That girl had been broken and scared and angry. That girl had slept in a car and cried under streetlights and studied by flashlight. That girl had worked 2 jobs and gone to school and never given up, even when everything seemed impossible. That girl had become me. I drove to my parents' new rental house. My father answered the door. He looked confused when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he said. I told him to open it. Inside the envelope were documents showing that all his debts had been paid. Every single one. The house was his again, well, the equity in it was. Everything had been cleared. My father's hand started shaking as he read through the papers. His face crumpled. "Maya, I don't understand. Why would you?" I looked at him and I said the words I'd been saving for 10 years. "You were right, Dad. Girls shouldn't depend on anyone to pay for them." So I didn't. I turned to leave before he could respond. He called after me. "Maya, wait. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I paused at the door. I didn't turn around. "I know," I said. "But I'm not sorry. I'm free." I walked to my car and I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see my father standing in the doorway, his shoulders shaking. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would feel. I just felt tired. Tired and free and finally at peace. I drove through the city with no particular destination. No music. No podcast. Just silence. Just the sound of my car engine and my own thoughts. I thought about my father. I thought about my brother. I thought about my mother. I thought about the girl I'd been and the woman I'd become. I thought about forgiveness and whether it was something I needed to give or something I needed to receive. In my voiceover in my mind, I heard myself saying words I'd said many times before. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's just peace. Sometimes the best thing you can do is build a life so good, so complete, so full, that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. Not because you hate them, but because you've moved beyond them. I wasn't angry at my father anymore. I was just sad for him. Sad that he'd wasted so many years on pride. Sad that he'd damaged his relationship with me over something as meaningless as gender. Sad that he'd never get to know the woman I'd become, because he'd refused to believe in the girl I was. 6 months after I paid off my father's debts, I did something with my success that made me feel more fulfilled than anything else I'd accomplished. I started a scholarship fund called the Torres Foundation for Women's Education. The fund provided full scholarships, tuition, books, living expenses, to girls whose families couldn't afford to pay for college. The first scholarship went to a 17-year-old named Elena, whose father had told her the exact same thing my father had told me. "You're a girl. You don't need college." In the application essay, Elena wrote about how she'd watched my YouTube videos and realized that she didn't need her father's permission to build a life. The foundation received hundreds of applications in the first year. I funded 50 scholarships. Each girl got everything I didn't get. Each girl got a chance. Every time one of them graduated, I cried. Every time I read their thank you letters, I felt like the pain had been worth something. These girls would go out into the world believing in themselves. These girls would never have to sleep in their cars or study by flashlight. These girls would have opportunities because I had fought for mine. A year later, I was invited to speak at a women's financial empowerment conference. The auditorium was full of women from all backgrounds. Young women, older women, women rebuilding their lives, women fighting for independence. I stood at the podium and I told my story. I told them about my father tearing up my acceptance letter. I told them about sleeping in my car. I told them about building my business from nothing. I told them about the day I bought my childhood home at an auction. I told them about paying off my father's debts and setting him free, even when he'd refused to do the same for me. And then I said the words that had become my life's mantra. We don't need permission to rise. We don't need anyone's belief to build something. We just need to believe in ourselves. The audience stood and applauded. I looked out into the crowd and in the back, I saw a familiar figure. My mother. She had tears streaming down her face. She mouthed the words, "I'm proud of you." I smiled. I finally smiled. Not for her. For me. For the girl I used to be. For the woman I'd become. For every girl out there who'd ever been told she wasn't worth investing in. I walked off stage as the lights faded, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the crowd still applauding. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning.